Welcome back to the Hoops Temple podcast. Y'all know me, Nathan Schwartz. Joining me from New Zealand, Dylan Williamson. Dylan, how you doing?
Very good, Nate. Great to be here on this most holy of NBA days. It's the first day of free agency where we get blockbuster deals such as Luke Kornet returning to the Celtics.
Hey, there was a moment when I was prepping for this and I was like, Max Christie's signed the biggest deal of the offseason. We can really get into discussions on how Max and the LeBron James Jr. off the bench dynamic duo will do. So at least we have a former NBA champion returning to his team. That is something of note.
Yeah, the good thing about this free agency is, it's a dangerous thing to record a podcast during the opening hours of free agency. Like, it's a very easy way to date yourself. But thankfully, the way that's worked out this year is that the biggest free agent, Paul George, is deciding to have meetings with 3 different teams, which means he's not going to sign for several days. And that means that all those second tier players are also not going to sign because they're going to be waiting to sign for whichever team doesn't sign Paul George. And so even though we've done a wonderful thing of recording on the day of free agency, there shouldn't be too many big moves go down right away other than Max Christie returning to the Lakers, and the Unicornet returning to the defending champs.
The Murder Cornet. Like a murder hornet, but a cornet. There is one other big deal made by the team whose shirt that you are currently repping. The Clippers have signed James Harden to a $70 million 2-year deal, which the second of which is a player option. How are we feeling about James Harden?
It's definitely good to have him back. Like, you get into this position with teams who are over a certain cap figure where letting good players go doesn't do you any good. And so if we let James Harden go, it doesn't give us flexibility to improve. And also there are no free agents to replace him with. Like, are we going to go out and get Tyus Jones? Like, is that a viable solution? And so it's honestly a little bit more than what I expected James Harden to get. The Clippers will be a second apron team, so there's no real effects other than it's just more money from out of Steve Ballmer's pocket. He pays almost double the team's salary once you factor in luxury tax. And so it's good to have Harden back. Money's a little bit higher than what I thought he would get, but it's clear that the Clippers have are prioritizing shorter-term deals to try to line things up, maybe a little bit with Kawhi. And that's probably the tension that's going on with Paul George as to why he hasn't signed yet.
Yeah, I've heard that if they just offered him the max of everything, he would have signed by now. But instead, they've attempted to try to get him to negotiate down from the max years, max money, taking on a more Kawhi-like deal, which is given a little bit up. So instead, Paul George is interested in meeting with the 76ers, the Clippers, and I forget who else. Is there another team that's...
The Orlando Magic.
I find that to be a really interesting idea. I don't think there's a chance he ends up there, but if they could get him and could have a front court of Paulo, Franz, and Paul George, or maybe it has to be a sign trade and they send Franz somewhere, although I think that would be a dream come true for Clippers first to get Franz. I think that's an interesting trio if they all did end up in Orlando. What do you think the ceiling on a Paul George Orlando team would be?
No, I mean, it's not really talked about because no one cares about Orlando. But
sure.
They actually would be a pretty solid team. They already had a very good season last year where they far outperformed expectations. Paolo Banchero every year exceeds what was expected of him. And Paul George fits in wonderfully there as a guy who is obviously a long, versatile defender when he wants to be. And then also adds the biggest element that they were missing, which is just on-ball shot creation. They flamed out in the playoffs because they didn't really have anyone that can create shots. And relying on Paul George to do that in the playoffs is maybe a little bit sketchy, but in theory, it's a skill set that he does possess. And so it actually would be a really good fit. most likely he's just using them for leverage. If he can say to the Clippers, hey, the Magic are giving me a 4-year max contract, I'll just go there if you don't want to, play ball and give me what I want. But yeah, it actually would be a pretty nice fit in terms of just like from a basketball perspective, maybe even the best option.
I do think just with him, Paulo, and Franz, they could go either big and play one of Franz or PG as the two. No, PG came in as a two. Franz has enough ball handling that in theory he could be a two with that much wing spacing. Like I wouldn't be too concerned with a little bit slower foot speed. Or they could go small. Paulo's been at the 5 a little bit. Paul, they never list him at the 5, but when I've watched Clippers games and they do those small ball lineups, he's quite commonly the backline rim protector. So I feel like he could also, the two of them could kind of combo up 5. And I think that having 3 guys who can kind of dribble, create, pass, and shoot with size, like all 6'10" or above, that's a really fun trio to think about. I don't think Orlando would pull the trigger or give him as much as he wants, just from a age and timeline perspective. I don't think it does them a ton of good to like give Paul George this massive deal and tie up all the cap space as their young players continue to develop. But I would like to see it.
Yeah, no, I mean the most likely situation is that Paul George is the 2. He's shown year after year that he prefers to play up and play more as a wing than as a forward, and that's probably gets them the most complete sort of lineup. But your starting lineup doesn't have to be your closing lineup, and we've seen in recent NBA years, and especially in the playoffs, that the way that you can really succeed as a team is by having scheme versatility. Not just being a team that can only succeed in one way. And so being able to play up or have Paul George as the 2 or as the 5, depending on what the matchup necessitates, does give you a lot of advantage.
The other interesting thing that came out of the first few moments of free agency, and I've got Woj's Twitter. If you are really zooming in on the glasses, you can see that I've got his Twitter page up, and I'm hitting refresh every few minutes just to see what else might be coming through. The other interesting news that came through is Chris Paul has officially been released. He had a $30 million non-guaranteed salary. That has now been stripped down to $0. And I feel a little bit crazy about this, but I do feel like he has some of the most value added, or he could provide some of the most value added versus contract to like a championship team. Like I'm just picturing he could get signed for less than $10 million, where someone's going to pay Kentavious Caldwell-Pope north of $20 million. And I don't think the value is double for adding KCP at this point in either of their respective careers.
Yeah, it's tough because there is also the potential that Chris Paul is just basically washed. He didn't have a great season last year, but we're like 2 years removed from him being a really impactful player on a really good team in Phoenix, who of course didn't, they ran into a big roadblock in the playoffs, but before that they were, a very good team, and Chris Paul had a very good season. And so if his actual play ability is somewhere even between those last 2 seasons, that's still a really valuable contributor. And if we're talking about value over contract, I mean, the most likely situation for him is a taxpayer mid-level contract, which is what is that, like 6 million?
I think it's like 5.9. So yeah.
So, I mean, because you expect that he's going to want to go to a team where he can compete for a championship, and those are all expensive teams. And so that taxpayer mid-level is the most likely contract for him. And so if he actually does have anything left, then I actually do think he could be a really useful player. The downside that I could see with Chris Paul is that his priority isn't winning, and that it's getting a starting job. And if your team is starting Chris Paul, or that he goes to a worse team to get more money to get the full mid-level, which is, we'll pay him like double what the taxpayer mid-level would, then he could end up in a less than favorable situation like he was in with Golden State.
I have a team that could offer him a starter's role and not very much money, but what if he was to join LeBron James with the Los Angeles Lakers? Finally giving LeBron the last of his banana boat pairing partners. He played with Wade in Miami. He played with Carmelo in Los Angeles. Now he could play with Chris Paul. Paul could get his starting gig back. Lakers could roll into that to next season with a starting lineup of Chris Paul, Klay Thompson, LeBron James, rumored to be interested in taking on Jeremy Grant's bad contract, and Anthony Davis.
I mean, that'd be a pretty stacked team.
I mean, it'd be very stacked if it was 2016. If it's 2016, that's a title contender. At this point,
that's by the standards of the shit shuffle. That's you know, that's the that's
an improvement
of shit shuffle. That's a shit shuffle super team right there. But yeah, no, the Lakers could be an interesting place for him to go. LeBron came out and said that he would consider taking less money if it meant that the Lakers could sign an impact player such as Jonas Valanciunas, of all people. And so I think Chris Paul is probably still better than Jonas Valanciunas, and is also one of LeBron's best friends. And so you could definitely see LeBron taking a bit of a pay cut, although he hasn't really done that since like forming the big three in Miami. Like, he always gets the most money that he can, and so maybe that's just trying to put pressure on the organization again. But yeah, I do think that Chris Paul could sign there and could start there. D'Angelo Russell unfortunately opted into his player option, which is probably not the best thing for the Lakers. Really affects their flexibility.
Oh no, it's sign and trade time. It's sign and trade. It is Golden State Part 2. He's going there, and Clay's coming to the sunny Los Angeles. Gonna take the boat down.
He's the human trade exception. The absolute funniest thing that could happen is D'Angelo Russell being traded back to Golden State, as he was before they. Well, I guess he signed. There was a sign and trade that brought him there, right? For Durant. Yeah, that would be the absolute funniest thing is D'Angelo Russell returning to the Warriors.
I'm just going to say it worked out very well for the Warriors. Getting D'Lo, being able to flip D'Lo for Wiggins, and the pick, I believe it was the Kuminga pick, if I'm not mistaken. It's like that worked out well. Why not repeat?
Yeah, and at the very least, it enables them to keep some matching salary. Although it depends what they prioritize. Like, they could get enough below the tax line that they could probably use the full mid-level if they don't bring back Klay, and could bring in an impact player that way. Of course, this is the first year where you can use the mid-level as a trade exception as well, and you don't have to do that only in the season. You can carry that forward, right up until the deadline, and take on $12 million in exchange for nothing, essentially, as long as you remain under the first apron of the luxury tax. And so maybe they'd prefer to go that route. But the other option is use D'Angelo Russell once again as a human trade exception, as matching salary for a bigger deal. Maybe someone like Jeremy Grant's bad contract.
Maybe. All right, I'm going to read through kind of a list of round robin things that have been signed or happened in the last few minutes. Russell Westbrook picked up his $4 million option, and Kevin Love opted out of his option and then signed a 2-year, $8 million deal. Sadiq Bey was not delivered a qualifying offer. He is now a free agent. Royce O'Neal has signed a 4-year, $44 million deal. Pistons are declining in Evan Fournier's $19 million. They will not be using him as a trade
Big shocker
target. Yes. What else is new? Manute Bol signed another 1-year deal with Phoenix, so they are keeping both Royce O'Neal and Manute Bol, really looking like Bol. Yes, thank you. Really looking like top prize getters. Obi Toppin, $60 million, 4 years. What do we think about this deal?
That seems like pretty reasonable money. Interesting for him to go early, so he didn't really. It seems like have discussions with other teams.
Mm-hmm.
Surprised that they did bring him back. He sort of fell out of Rick Carlisle's rotations at certain points. But as like a backup four, I think he's perfectly reasonable. And this is maybe a little bit over what a backup four would get, but it's seems like a fairly reasonable contract. As long as they
I was
actually
gonna
play him. Like
say,
if they pay him all this money to just have him as their 11th man, then it's not so good.
it is nice though to have him as a trade chip, although the 4 years does feel like a lot to have for a trade chip. Um, he is 30. I don't see this contract aging that well, although with the cap
He's
continuing to move
30?
up, he's 30. Yeah.
Wow, okay. How time
I
flies.
would have
What
I
the
thought he
hell?
was older. I was thinking he was already like 33, and so I was like, this is gonna age poorly quickly, but
That's
I guess
crazy. I would
pay
have
the
guessed
guy.
like 26.
Oh man.
I'm,
No, no,
I'm
no.
now
If I
lower
look
on
at
the deal. Is he really 30? That's crazy.
he's listen, if I look at a guy and I'm like, you're like my age, right? That's no longer where I want NBA players to be.
Mm.
Um, I bought a new house in the last year. Some listeners may know, actually in the last few months. And the sellers left behind a like 14-foot aluminum rowboat that they was beached up on the shore. I now live on a river, and so I dragged that into the river just to make sure it floats. And I rowed around for a little bit, and then I had to like drag it back up onto the shore, which there's like a 2-foot drop. So I'm basically like free lifting this 14-foot aluminum boat out, and my back has been in pain for the last 48 hours. So if you're my age and you're in the NBA, I really worry about how much more time you got.
Especially on a 4-year contract. And a guy who's, he has made some improvements in shooting, but really his one skill is that he can run fast and jump high, which you maybe don't like aging too well. That's surprising that he, one, is that old, and two, that at being so old, they gave him the 4-year contract. Maybe like me, they didn't realize how old he was, and now they're like, wait, he's 30? At the start of this deal, not at the end of it?
It sneaks up on you fast, Dylan. I know you'll get here soon. Other than that, we haven't talked in quite some time because of family vacations and travels and whatnot. So, one, we've never addressed the Celtics winning the championship. Two, we haven't addressed any of the draft things. And three, we haven't addressed either of the Mikal Bridges or the Dejounte Murray trades. Where do you want to go with any of those?
Celtics winning is felt inevitable at a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
So well done to them. The draft was not all that exciting. Lakers seem to have got a good pick late, picking up the connector, lower than what he was projected to get. So they've got 2024 Doug McDermott. Nothing really too exciting other than that. Dejounte to the Pelicans for what seemed like a pretty low asking price. What was your take on that in terms of value for both teams?
I do think the Hawks bought high on Murray. I thought they overpaid for him. I'm actually kind of surprised that they were able to get 2 picks and what seems like a really quality young player. I really do like Dyson Daniels. I understand that his shot is rough, but he's a very good defensive player, and I like his passing. Um, Not just like him finding guys, but the ball doesn't stick in his hands. He makes very quick, very smart, intuitive reads. And a lot of times it's not even the assist, it's the pass that leads to the assist. I fell in love with watching Pelicans ball at one point during the year and watched a lot of them in a row, mainly because I was really on a Jordan Hawkins kick. Just got me excited for some reason. And so I think Daniels will be a really nice piece. That said, I don't know if he ever like becomes a star. Like if you told me he becomes Josh Giddey but with better defense in 2 years, like I think that's a very realistic potential is just a connective piece that maybe you don't have to take out of the game as much because he at least will shoot at times.
Yeah, I mean, the two picks that they got, there was next year's Lakers pick, which is probably going to be, most likely around where it was this year, sort of late teens. Next year's draft is supposed to be better, so maybe that does have some value. There was the better of New Orleans and Milwaukee's pick.
The worst of
okay
of I think it's the Pelicans and the Bucks pick in 2027.
And so you'd expect that is probably late teens at best, more likely in the 20s. And so you get 2 non-lottery picks in exchange for a guy who has been an all-star. And so the value really depends on their evaluation of Dyson Daniels. And he came into the league, and even before that, playing with G League Ignite, he was supposed to be a point guard. And so I think the evaluation of this deal is all going to come down to whether he can develop that on-ball game. As you said, he's developed into a pretty nice away from the action passer, a second side creator at best, and an excellent defender. And so if he can take those existing skills and then add some on-ball creation, running pick and rolls, hopefully creating jump shots, then this becomes a very reasonable deal. If he can never get to the point where he's a point guard, where he's like a skinny wing, who's just a defender, maybe it's not so good of a deal. But at the same time, you could always assume with these types of deals that they took the best offer that was on the table. I do feel like they had to do something. And if I was in their position, I'd probably have traded Dejounte for just whatever the best package available was. And apparently this was it. And so it is, by that perspective, consider ignoring the sunk cost, probably a decent deal for them.
Yeah. I mean, it was very clear that Dejounte and Trey do not like playing together, whether that is a poor coaching scheme, whether that is a personality clash. Having them together made them both worse. And so you took a very valuable asset and just plummeted its value significantly. So, like, I think they got the best they could. On the Pelicans side of things, the Pelicans, at least seemingly, will return with Brandon Ingram. I forget their general manager, his name off the top of the head, but he came out and said, "Hey, BI wants to be here. We want BI to be here. We'll figure it out." Now that could all be smoke and mirrors, try and drive up price. But if they can enter next year with Ingram, Zion, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Murray, and CJ, those are 6 really good rotation pieces that any team would want to have in their rotation. They are now completely devoid of having a big man since Larry Nance Jr. left. Maybe they can call Atlanta up and figure out a way to get Clint Capella to come there or something. Maybe it looks like the Utah Jazz have waived Omar Yurt-7 in the most recent Woj tweets. So you got Yurt-7 out there. They need to find a big man, but they have 7, but they've got 6 really key rotation pieces that are ready for big NBA minutes right now. Get another one, get some health, and the Pelicans could be a top 6 seed.
Yeah. I mean, you take those 6 guys who, as you say, 6 quality starters. 2 of them probably come off the bench so that you can play some sort of a big man. And so your bench becomes incredibly stacked. Their bench already last year was one of the best in the league, outperformed the starters in terms of net rating differential. You throw in Jose Alvarado, who's still on the team, and your boy, young Kobe Jordan Hawkins. And that bench is now ridiculous. Clearly, the big problem is that they have no bigs. They drafted Yves Messi, who is a big man. an athletic center, and so maybe the plan is to go the Dallas route of just we drafted a center. He should be all right. We'll make his job very easy. Defend at the rim and catch a lob, and otherwise don't do anything. And so maybe they're going the Derek Lively route, and they're going to start him. Chances are he's not ready to be a NBA starting big man, and so they're gonna, if they go that route, they will probably end up hurting on the interior, where Zion's not a good rebounder. Missy is a bit thin, so he probably doesn't project as a great defensive rebounder in terms of a box out guy. And then they simultaneously don't have money to sign a good center. They're probably going to be not offering up the full mid level because of salary concerns. I believe they're pushing right up against the tax line. And also there are no good centers to even sign. Are they going to go out and get Andre Drummond? That doesn't, really help your starting center spot either. And so I do think that they've got another move to make. I wouldn't expect them to go into the season with all 6 of those guys on the roster, especially when you combine that with the fact that Brandon Ingram wants a raise. He's going from 35. He probably wants 50. And so you're $50 million more, $15 million more expensive there. And Trey Murphy is in the last year of being cheap before he also needs a raise. And so you've got to do something this year to set up for next year. And so I think the most likely outcome is that they do make a move for a center.
Yeah, I just don't know what the center is worth either of those guys. I mean, I'd almost just say throw the money back at Valanciunas, re-sign him, because you can re-sign your own guys.
Yeah.
I feel like working that out probably makes the most sense. I mean, what are they going to trade for Nikola Vucevic? Where is the center market that is worth either Trey or Ingram? I don't think there is one that is available. And so if you're looking at trading Ingram for multiple pieces, say you trade Ingram for Clint Capella and something else, probably not with Atlanta now, just because they've already re-signed, but let's say Sacramento says, you know what, this isn't working out. Goodbye, Sabonis. Ingram for Sabonis.
My favorite one is my favorite one is Ingram for Brook Lopez.
But I feel like that's a terrible deal for the Pelicans. Well, yeah.
In terms of value, sure, but it would definitely improve the fit of their on-ball players. Brook Lopez is probably the best fit next to Zion that is, plausibly available.
Okay. I'm going to say it. I love Splash Mountain, and the Adrian Griffin did him no favors with trying to have him bring him up to the front of the screens, have the switching. It's not like Doc did him a lot more favors. Brook on the year, 12 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, 2.4 blocks. You stand him near the rim, he can get blocks. The 3-point shooting's been inconsistent in the last couple of years with Brook. It's 36%, 36.6. So it's not bad, but it fluctuates pretty wildly with him. I don't know that Brook is still the same guy, and Brook is 35. So I've heard the name thrown around a lot, and it does feel like a lot of teams are looking at Brook, and Milwaukee's like, well, we could try to get involved in this trade or that trade with Brook, and I'm like, I just don't know that is. I don't know that anybody's really that excited to bring in Lopez.
Yeah, and with older guys like that, normally their fall off is very sudden. It's not a slow decline with this kind of player. It's just 1 year they are good, and then the next year they're too old and their body breaks down and they have foot or knee issues, and the shot goes from 36% to 30%, and all of a sudden you're no longer guarded and he's a little bit too slow to recover into help position. And so there's always that chance that he's just 1 year he's good and the next year he's washed. And so that is a risk as well.
Yeah, that's just kind of my fear is someone's going to end up trading for him, and it's just not going to be worth their move. So The other move we had, Mikal Bridges going to the Knicks for a crap ton of picks. Then kind of the follow-up deal with Brooklyn and Houston to trade around some picks to get Brooklyn their original picks back. What do you think about this? How do you feel the ceiling is for I guess the Knicks?
Yeah. I mean, in the era that we're in, where there are no super dominant teams, there's no clear championship favorite going into the season. We're sort of in this era of best healthy team wins the championship. And so getting yourself the into the tier where if you're healthy and you get a couple breaks that you're good enough, I think that the Knicks have gotten there. Like Jalen Brunson is probably a top 10 player in the NBA at this point. The Knicks, between Bridges and Anunoby, and hopefully they're able to bring back Hardenstein, although that probably gets a bit sketchy by taking on Bridges. They're looking like a top defense. And when you've got a top 10 offensive player and, sort of like a top 5 defensive roster, that definitely gets you to a fairly high basis point. And so I do like the move from the Knicks in terms of Bridges being probably the best player available. Combine that with the fact that he's an excellent fit no matter where he goes. Combine that with the fact that he can play big minutes and never gets hurt. And then combine that with the fact that he's going to have excellent chemistry with this team. And I do think that it's a good move from them to go all in, to back Jalen Brunson as their top guy, to put the pieces around him where hopefully he's able to carry them to the level that they need to get to, and just throw themselves into the mix where they have a chance to be the best team that is healthy.
I think the Knicks have a extremely high chance of coming out of the East next year. I say that knowing that I think like upside wise, they're probably the third best team. I still believe, well, maybe fourth, depending on what Philly does at this point. I still believe that there's an off season together. Doc can figure something out to make the Giannis Lillard case work better, but Brunson single-handedly carried the Knicks really far. Dante DiVincenzo has exploded as an even better catch and shoot player than I think I ever thought was possible for him. Josh Hart has no ends, no bounds, no limits to what he can do. Just as far as his hustle and his heart, adding now a actually good player to that mix, and having the defense of Bridges and OG Anunoby together, that may be one of the best wing combos. I was listening to Simmons talk about it, and Bill Simmons, he was saying that like he kind of worried that the Knicks were throwing too much in to try to stop the Celtics. I don't think that's the case at all. It seems like the Knicks are committed to trying to bring back Hartenstein. They're currently hard capped, but they're looking to make a move to get themselves unhard capped to then go re-sign as a Hartenstein. If you bring back Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson, you've got two bigs that were able to kind of tag team play against Embiid. If you're going up against the Bucks, having OG and Bridges, that's a pretty good defensive combo for guarding Lillard and Giannis and being able to switch a Lillard-Giannis pick and roll. And if you're going up against Jokic, you've got enough guys that can try to take away the cutters and multiple big options. I think that's just a really well-rounded team that could handle both of them or all of those teams.
Yeah, and more importantly, on the at least from the Bucks' perspective, and probably against the Nuggets too, it's very important to have competent rim protection. We saw the way that Dallas were able to succeed by having 48 minutes of good rim protectors, and so if you can get Hardenstein and Mitchell Robinson both healthy, combined with elite perimeter defense, that gets you to a very high level. And if we, I guess debated the Simmons point a little bit that they were, gearing up everything to go against the Celtics, but between Bridges and Anunoby, is there any team in the league that has a better setup to stop the Celtics, combined with great rim protection? Probably not. And so you're looking at the teams that they have to go through and to get to a potential championship, and they seem not only that they are closer to being matched to those teams in terms of talent, but also now have excellent matchups with those guys.
All right, so we've gotten a few notes that have come out from not Woj or Shams, but the Lakers' offer for Jeremy Grant is D'Angelo Russell, Gabe Vincent, and a second-round pick.
Jesus.
Hey, look at Jeremy Grant's contract and tell me if that's not good value. Maybe.
God.
I'm just
Could I at least
saying.
get like a vending machine or a photocopier in there? Give me some extra
for the
value.
Lakers or for the Blazers?
Yeah, for the Blazers. Like, Jesus Christ, man, give me something.
I'm just saying. I'm pulling up his contract now. I think eating the rest of this contract is going to be worth more than any photocopier. Like, I'm almost mad that the Lakers are the team rumored to be giving up the pick. Where even is Portland?
God.
There they are. All right, Portland. Jeremy Grant will be making $32 million next year, 34 the following year, and then has a player option for $36 million in 2028. Oh, I'm sorry. This already moved forward 1 year. So 25, he's making $30 million, 26, 32, 27, 34, and then 28. So he's got 4 more years of this. That the player option is $36 million.
I don't think that's that bad. The cap is going to be going up 10% each year. And that, of course, compounds, whereas your contract is based on the previous year's contract. It's not tied to the cap, and so it doesn't compound. And the new situation that we're going into, like 20 million is the minimum for like a decent starter. And so if you're saying that Grant is maybe a more towards a potential low-level star, then about 30 million seems about right for him. So like maybe the years you don't like all the years, but that contract is going to get cheaper and cheaper, and I think by the end of it, 34 million or whatever it was seems like a lot, but 4 years from now, 34 million is probably like just like good starter salary.
Okay. Counterpoint. Jeremy Grant is not a low-level star. Jeremy Grant is also 29 years old currently. So let's just keep some age in perspective.
Jeremy Grant is younger than Obi Toppin. It's wild.
Younger than Royce O'Neal.
Oh,
Royce is
yeah. Everyone knows that.
Yeah, Obi's young. Obi's.
Oh man.
Did you get flip flopped and think that Obi was 30 when I said that?
Yeah. That's why my mind was blown. I was like, how is Obi Toppin 30 years old?
No,
Royce O'Neal would have guessed it's like 34.
That's what I was saying.
Okay, never mind.
Let's see.
So Obi Toppin's not 30?
25.
Okay.
No, Obi is 25.
All right. That's perfect.
All right.
Man.
And then I saw a rumored Golden State Warriors deal here that the Warriors were talking, or the Bulls called the Warriors for a trade that was rebuffed by the Warriors, offering in Zach LaVine for a package built around on Chris Paul's salary that the Warriors just waived. And the Warriors said, no, we would rather not have Zach LaVine. We will just waive Chris Paul. So LaVine may be stuck.
I love that the choice was Zach LaVine or nothing. The Warriors were like, let's go for nothing.
What else we got coming on right now? The Clippers are actively working on trades for Russell Westbrook. Is there a team that wants Russell right now?
He's on a pretty low level of salary, and
$4 million.
he did have a decent year, and so I think there are a few teams out there that you could talk yourself into him being a decent backup point guard on a very cheap salary. And for the Clippers, maybe this is gearing up towards having to pay Paul George a lot of money, and they are already ridiculously expensive. I was looking at the luxury tax payments yesterday. I think the Clippers were something like over 100 million in just tax, which like Steve Ballmer is the richest owner in the NBA, but even for him, paying $100 million for nothing every year is absurd. And so, losing Russell Westbrook probably saves like $20 million in tax or something.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm just trying to think who would really want him. And I feel like the teams that would want him are teams that are contenders who have a lot already tied up that can't send out much. So it's like we'll take Westbrook for very little. So I don't know where the Clippers are going to get value in return other than just getting that cap space freed up. I mean, maybe Orlando.
Yeah, I mean they probably don't want anything in return. It's probably just, can you take him without us having to give you anything and without us having to take anything worse back? And so, yeah, like there is the contenders who just need quality players and don't have a lot to trade for it. But there's also just like teams who are trying to be good and need a floor raiser. Like Russell Westbrook, was a horrible fit on the Lakers, but he was a perfectly decent backup point guard for the Clippers last year. And for a like fringe playoff team who just need any sort of creation off the bench, like that's a fine role, especially when you're paying him almost nothing, where if it doesn't work out, you can just waive him and it doesn't hurt you that much.
Hear me out. There's a team that had a backup point guard 2 years ago that was really valuable, not much of a shooter, but a lot of energy, a lot of off-ball cuts, and they have a player who's really good at finding cutters. What if he went to Denver?
That actually would be probably a pretty decent fit. However, Denver are going incredibly cheap. They will not take on any money whatsoever. Their owner is absolutely bitching out, doing a terrible job in the process of trading good players for worse players, letting good players go in exchange to save a few bucks. And so, would he be a decent fit? Yeah, that would actually be pretty decent for them. But knowing their situation that they're in, where their owner is trying to save money, taking on $4 million, doesn't seem likely for him, even though it would improve the team.
Well, he did just move out Reggie Jackson, so there's some space there. I think he was supposed to be making like $5 million. So you got 5 or 8. You got some savings, right?
Yeah, that's like the creating space to bring back KCP, dumping a guy who can play, so that you can re-sign your own free agent because you're too cheap to pay the tax.
Yeah.
If they lose KCP, like Nikola Jokic should sue his organization for malpractice. If they can't even keep KCP, like that's an outrage. So hopefully the Reggie Jackson move is going to be, setting up being able to pay KCP.
Yeah. Other breaking news from also non-Woj and Shams sources, which is basically what I'm just going to refer to the rest of NBA media, because if I don't hear from Woj,
need like
I don't
a nice
hear from
abbreviation.
Shams. Yeah. NWAES. Not. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Not Shams or Woj. Neither of them is reporting that the Kings are putting together a package offer to try to trade for Brandon Ingram's, potentially pairing Keegan Murray, Ingram, Sabonis, Fox, and I don't know, Keon Ellis if he sticks around as the new starting 5. I gotta imagine Herter and or Barnes will be in the deal to make salaries work. Probably both of them. What do we think about
a UFA?
Hmm.
But yeah, no, that seems like the type of team that should trade for Brandon Ingram. that already have a number one, so Ingram isn't overexerted there. Decent sort of fit. So one of the difficulties with Ingram is that he, with a lot of other star players, it can be kind of duplicative in his skill set, which is trying to get to the elbow and shoot contested mid-range jumpers. There are a lot of star players that are trying to do that and can do it better than him. And while Fox had one season of being the greatest mid-range shooter of all time, it's not really the way that he succeeds. And Sabonis can make those shots easier in terms of running handoff plays and that sort of thing. And for Sacramento, who were a non-playoff team last year, and every year the West gets crazier and deeper, like they have to do something. They're not good enough now, and so Ingram to raise the floor, maybe even raise the ceiling, just in terms of getting another high-level creator, if indeed he can be that. I think this is the exact type of player that they should be going for, and this is the exact type of team that should be going for Ingram.
Barnes is still under contract, $18 million. Kevin Huerter is close to $17 million this year. So they could package them together for him, or do like one of them and Trey Lyles, or one of them Duarte and maybe another piece, maybe Jalen McDaniels, who they just got. I've seen Sacramento fans saying maybe you also go for Levine, just say fuck defense. We're going to be an all offense team. I don't know that I like that one, but
Didn't he sign his qualifying offer that got matched for the max contract? Didn't he sign that with Sacramento all those years ago?
Ingram? I don't remember. Levine? Oh yeah, Levine totally did.
And so there you go. They got what they wanted after all. But no, that seems like a terrible play. How is Sacramento fitted for in terms of draft picks? Because if I'm the Pelicans and I've got a valuable player in terms of a wing who can create shots, I'm not giving him up for Harrison Barnes and Kevin Huerter. So what do they have in the way of assets?
They had at least 3 available last season. I don't know with this draft having had happened if that maybe freed up a 4th one, but they at least have 3 available that they can trade.
Let me bring it up real quick.
And I'm just going to say, historically speaking, Kings draft picks are a thing you can bank on. If I had to bet on which team was going to give me good picks, I feel like I'd bank on Brooklyn picks. I'd bank on Kings picks. Recent history suggests Pistons picks. So, if you get one of those 3 teams to give you a pick, I'd be pretty happy with it.
Let's see. They owe 2025, so they can't do 2026. They've got their 27, they've got their 28, they've got their 29, they've got their 30, and they've got their 31. Okay. So other than 2025, they've got all their own picks. So they could do something like 7, 9, 31, and they could do swaps in between. So they've got a bit there.
Yeah, they've got some options with it, but all right. I think that's about all the free agency news. That's also the major trades. Denver did trade Reggie Jackson. The Kings made a trade giving up Sasha Vezenkov.
Do you know what I like? There was a trade. Quintin Grimes to Dallas.
Yes. Okay. I might be the last person that has Quintin Grimes stock, and maybe he's
I'm with you, man.
You're with me? Good.
Yeah.
I feel like this guy can still play. He got hurt last year, fell out of Tibbs' rotation. Oh no, a guard who isn't Josh Hart and just absolutely busting his ass every possession defensively falls out of rotation. Like, I'm not ready to write him off. And I feel like I'm trying to pull him up to see how old he is, but I feel like he's got to be like 23 and has potential as a shooter. I feel like Grimes one could be the best player out of this trade last year, and that's not to downplay what Tim Hardaway Jr. did. He had some really good games in the month of December, or maybe it was early January, back when Luka and back when Luka was missing a little bit of time or Kyrie was missing time. He's dropping a couple of 40-point nights. I think that there's still a lot of potential left in Quintin Grimes as a shooter to really develop.
Yeah, and I would like to downplay Tim Hardaway Jr. because the way that Dallas got really good is they just stopped fucking playing him. They just took him completely out of the rotation. Then all of a sudden they like got way better. Like people, maybe attribute it more to the trades that they did, but at the same time as they made those trades to improve the roster, they also just stopped playing Tim Hardaway Jr. And their deep playoff run, they didn't play him at all until they got to the finals and just needed anything. Like they were playing Josh Green and Jaden Hardy over him. He was completely out of the rotation, and that's how they succeeded. And so if Quintin Grimes is healthy, he's probably a better player on both ends of the floor. And so to give away a guy who you got better by just not playing at all and who makes way more money to get Quintin Grimes, unless like he's just so, his foot or whatever it is just so bad that he's, not really going to be able to play. Then maybe that explains why Detroit did this. But if not, then Quintin Grimes is a better player than Tim Hardaway Jr. on both ends of the floor. And this is an absolute steal for Dallas, who continues to sort of add value around the margins.
So I think they're both in the better situation for themselves. Because Tim Hardaway Jr. plays really good with the ball in his hands. I mean, not really good, but like it's a little bit like D'Angelo Russell, another player that you famously do not love. These guys, when they have the ball in their hands all the time, they'll put up good numbers. They're not going to necessarily lead to a lot of wins, but like, oh no, Kyrie's hurt for a week. Who can we slot in to fill this role? D'Lo or Tim Hardaway Jr. will do a better job filling that role of a missing Kyrie.
Yeah,
than
Tim Hardaway Jr.'s his best skill is elevating your offense from absolutely terrible to just bad. Like he's a low floor raiser. He's able to create shots just enough that you won't be the worst offense in the league if you have to play him. If you're already a decent offense, then he's taking stuff off the table by not having the best shot selection, being very inconsistent, and being a bad defender. But for a team like the Pistons, who when they went to their bench were the worst offense in the league, then he provides value. Like he can create a shot.
That's cute that you think he's going to come off the Pistons bench. You think Jaden Ivey's going to start over this guy?
They've got a few players to play now. Who did they pick up in the draft?
Ron Holland, who I do feel bad. I like Ron Holland. I like what he showed. I had him slipping a little bit further, just because I think it is going to be really hard to be like. I don't know that I fully see the highest upside with him, so I had him slipping farther because he can't really he can't shoot at all. Like guys were talking about watching his workouts, his trials, and they're like, yeah, empty gym, and he's putting up air balls. He's you watch like bad shooters, and when they go through the workouts and they're hitting like 15 straight, and this guy's chucking up like 5 air balls out of 20 shots. Adding that distance is just a rough place to add another non-shooter.
We didn't get a chance to really go deep into the players on the draft in our mock draft. We were going fairly quickly through an entire first round, but and also didn't necessarily have a chance to pick guys in the right spots that maybe we were higher on. But Holland is like, I'm almost like the opposite with him, where I would have actually like reached and got him as high as like third, because and like this bad draft where you're just drafting role players at every spot, he at least has like the that faint glimmer of becoming a really good player. Whereas all these guys have certainly much higher floors and much higher sort of probable outcomes. But with like his physical tools, I think his absolute ceiling, which of course is unlikely to hit, is a lot higher than all these guys who you're drafting to just be like, a solid starter or like decent backup at like top 5 range. And so like most likely outcome for him is probably like, maybe like fucking, Bruno Caboclo. You remember him? 2 years away from being
I
2 years
do.
away. Yeah. And so that's probably like, a equal chance of Bruno Caboclo as, Paul George. But with the physical tools, at least you've got that high ceiling, which none of the other guys, probably in the draft really had.
I get flashbacks of Stanley Johnson. Just
Stanley Johnson,
the guy that had
another
he
good
had
comp, or
all the
like Josh
tools.
Jackson. Like
Yeah,
there's definitely a long history of these guys that you draft because they've got physical tools and they just never develop develop that. But I'd rather in a weak draft where you're drafting guys who aren't going to be that good anyway, I'd rather, maybe take that risk more so than I would in a better draft.
that's fair. I really after Reed Shepard went 3. There was no one left in that range that I really wanted the Pistons to take. I was like, Donovan Clegane doesn't necessarily excite me because I do think Jalen Duren is
Yeah, you've
solid.
already got Duren,
I
who's
don't
like
know about
a
how you
similar
feel
kind of
about playing
player.
them together. Yeah, Tijan Salon. I understand what you're saying because like I actually really liked the Hornets picking Tijan Salon because I'm like,
Yeah,
all right,
the
none of these
same thing
guys.
there, right?
Yeah, none of these guys are great. Tijan, he's going to run the floor incredibly well, be great on the break with LaMelo pushing it. Maybe he develops a 3-point shot. His upside pick, if he can hit it, is going to be a Serge Ibaka. And hey, I would love to get a Serge Ibaka on like 90% of teams in this league.
Not
Maybe
not to
100.
mention that he brings a wonderful smile to the team,
Yeah.
in his own
And
words.
he's
Did you see
have
that
you
interview?
I haven't. I haven't, no.
They asked what he can bring to the team, and he said, a smile.
Oh God. Um
He's just happy to be there. He's gonna bring positivity to the team.
Have you seen the French national team roster?
I don't know that I've specifically seen it, but I'm generally aware of some of the players they have. But continue.
So I saw it because there was a report that they had cut Killian Hayes and Ousmane Dieng, and I was like, "How are these guys getting cut? France cannot have that many good players." And I looked at the roster. Not only are they cut, France doesn't have Sarr, Risache, or Tijan or Datier. Like none of their first round picks are on this, and it is chock full of either like solid good NBA players, like Nicholas Batum
Or
is on there, and
yeah,
or like
or
really
guys
good
who
EuroLeague players.
could, yeah, and guys who could be in the NBA at a lower level but choose to stay in Europe because they have a better role and probably more money there.
Yeah, I was shocked. France, we talk about 2 years away from me, 2 years away. France 2028 Olympic team, provided some of these players hit. Uh, France could be supporting a like 12-man NBA roster. There could be guys starting in the NBA coming off the bench for the French national team. So uh, that'll be fun to watch.
Gobert and Wemby in the front court.
Sar and Risache on off the bench.
Oh,
I mean, Risache is probably the 3. I don't know how much. I don't know that Batum's got much more in him. You had said that
yeah,
he had talked
40-year-old
about
Nick
retiring.
Batum. Um, Funnily, it was actually his wife. His wife said, "Yeah, he's going to retire." He never said that. His wife was forcing it upon him. She's like, "Yeah, he's done after this year." He never said anything of the sort.
I mean, you have to. Sometimes you got to be pushed.
Yeah,
Um,
he's still a quality NBA player. Like he's still got something left.
yeah, no, there are a lot of teams that would really like him.
Yeah, he's like a fringe starter. Like
All right,
he's like a $10 million player.
yeah. Let's see who else did they have. I forgot. Do you know Olivier Sarr, the Thunder player?
Yeah, yeah.
That's I didn't realize that was Alex Sarr's brother. And I saw it mentioned. I was like, oh yeah, that does make sense. He's French, has the same last name. That kind of.
Mm.
Oh, breaking news
Let's
has
go. Give
tweeted
it to
out
me.
that free agent center DeAndre Drummond has signed a 2-year, $10 million deals with the Philadelphia 76ers.
God. What a strange move to come out at this time. One that the Sixers are using their cap space to sign a backup center. Although I guess they could at that level, maybe actually, yeah, I think they could probably fit him into the room exception, so they can still use all their cap space and then use the room exception on Drummond. Obviously, backup centers has been a big issue for them, and Andre Drummond was one of the best backup centers in the league last year. But an indication of how weak the market is that Andre Drummond, who we said was like the third best free agent center, is getting $5 million.
Yeah. It sounds like the Thunder are pursuing Isaiah Hartenstein, as are the Knicks. After that, though, I just don't know what other centers people are really trying to go for.
Yeah, it's Valanciunas and Drummond are the two next best centers, so it's an incredibly weak free agent center market.
That's rough. Hopefully, the Pelicans keep Val. All right, we didn't get a good chance to talk a lot of draft. What is your favorite draft pick? Like best player to best team, or best like fit in your mind that you were happiest to see?
Let me bring them up so that I don't miss anything. Do you have one while I look up the picks to make sure I don't forget anyone?
I mean, listen, personal hometown bias. I fucking love Dalton Connect sliding to the Lakers. I was very high on him. I thought that he would be a perfect fit in Memphis. I thought OKC might take him. I thought Sacramento might take him. He would be nice there just to round out the team, to have someone that's a little bit more NBA ready. Getting a guy that can do something for not much. I think it's much better than trying to take a project if you're the Lakers. I do have Adam Morrison flashbacks, but Morrison was never going to be a star, but he would at least be decent. And I think that's the mindset Connect has, is I'm going to be a bench player. I'm going to come in for 15 minutes a night. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and like gives the Lakers a legitimate shooter. Like if there's nothing else, I struggle to see a world in which he doesn't at least become a good shooter. A connective passer, maybe not the worst defender. Like I heard the comparison of like a more athletic Doug McDermott, and like if that's the floor is like a guy that can shoot and can kind of run the floor and won't get totally obliterated on defense, like that's perfectly fine for a outside of the lottery pickup.
I also really I gotta check this, because there's so many trades that I don't actually think that this guy went to the team that Basketball Reference is showing that he's going to. Yeah. So your guy, Bobby Clintman, joins just an impressive draft by Minnesota, where they get Terrence Shannon Jr., who I loved and picked in our mock draft, going to Minnesota. One of the few picks that we absolutely nailed. And then they traded it for Rob Dillingham, and I think that's a really nice way to round out the rotation. They got a defensive guard in Terrence Shannon that can defend, can cut, can play on or off ball, and can shoot. A high volume scoring, fast as all hell. Reminds me a lot of Tyrese Maxey, point guard, and Rob Dillingham. And then a little bit of a project that could develop into a big who can shoot and can dribble, and your guy Bobby Clintman. So I think Minnesota had an excellent draft.
Yeah, and an interesting move from them to trade future assets to move up to get Dillingham. It's not the type of move that you normally see from a contender. Typically, rookies are slow, especially guards, are slow to develop into actual impact players. And theoretical assets of future draft picks are always more valuable than a specific player. It's like draft pick can be anything, whereas Dillingham is what he is, and so is a less valuable trade asset. And so this is really a big swing from their front office to say, like, this is a guy that we think is actually going to be able to contribute and is going to be able to be part of our long-term plan, and to like move future assets to go and get him is a pretty ballsy move.
I do like some of the takes that have been like, well, listen, Tim Connelly might not be here when these assets, come. Man's trying to get a ring and then get out of there because.
But I mean,
he
like those picks also could have been used to trade for a veteran who can contribute, and so to use them instead to get a rookie is a very ballsy move. It's a big bet.
Sure, it is. Yeah, with Tim Connelly's whole deal, Tim Connelly was brought in part by Rodriguez and Lazary, and was given like ownership stake in the team as part of his signing there with them. But if their ownership deal falls through, does his ownership stake fall through? So like, if I'm him, I'm making moves with just complete no regard for the future until I know like where this deal is shaking out. Like I'm proving my value and just getting ready to potentially bounce if that ownership falls through. Like,
yeah, and I mean there is
maybe I'll
that
go sign somewhere else.
There is that moral hazard that all GMs face where if you aren't good immediately, you're probably going to be fired anyway. And so you're better to trade future assets for short-term success. And unless you're like one of these
You cut off in the middle there. You said unless you're one of the. Oh, Dylan is struggling with the audio here.
unless you're one of these very stable like organizational centerpiece GMs, like if you're Brad Stevens or Pop to a degree, like one of these guys that you're going to be there no matter what to see the long term, you are incentivized to play more of a short term kind of game.
Sure. All right. Well, now you've had a chance to look at the draft. Is there anything that really stands out to you?
Reed Shepherd to Houston, I think, is a very good pickup, where he can play backup point guard to Fred VanVleet in the short term, and then take over. Gives Houston's got this really nice setup where they should be able to be a pretty good team right away, and also have younger players who can hopefully take over from the veterans and maybe take them to higher levels. Reed Shepherd should be able to be a pretty decent starting point guard, as long as that shot can fall against NBA athleticism. The Spurs get maybe their point guard in Stephon Castle. He, is he actually a point guard? I would say probably not. But apparently he refused to work out for teams where he wasn't going to be able to come in and be a point guard. And so that's probably the deal that the Spurs are getting by drafting him. They, obviously had a big hole at the one. And so this addresses it with probably the best potential point guard that was on the board, other than Dillingham, who they, traded to Minnesota essentially. Then you've got the swings from the teams who need to take swings, the Pistons and the Hornets. Probably the exact guys that they should have taken. They need, shots at a star. And there weren't any other players lower on the board that had a kind of star, even ceiling, even if it's not likely. And so Ron Holland and Solon are probably the two guys who high, maybe boom bust kind of guys. And so I like that. Same thing for Utah taking Cody Williams, another guy who has some physical tools. If he can gain in some weight, that would be wonderful. And then can maybe become a pretty decent wing player. And if not, they are at the very start of a rebuild, and a couple missed draft picks, especially, a number 10 is not bad. And then maybe my favorite pick, the Thunder get in Nikola Topic, who had been mocked as high as like a top 3 kind of guy, and then tore his ACL. And so he's probably out for the season, but recent NBA history suggests that ACL is something that you can fully come back from, and shouldn't be a long-term deterrent. And so to get picked up by the Thunder, who can afford to have him not play at all this year, and maybe becomes a decent backup, or maybe even more in the future, I think is a really good pickup for them. And Kyle Filipowski to Utah seems destined. But anyway.
Yeah. I think this draft, we'll see when they all take the court. But I'm walking away with a lot higher feelings on it because I do feel like teams drafted guys that kind of fit their need. There wasn't so much of this guy's got a ton of talent, let's do the upside swings. So like Chicago getting Montes Bazilis. That is an awesome pickup for them. I love his attitude. I love his kind of thought processes. Now, the fact that like he's a 3-and-D player that can do some ball handling, that doesn't really shoot threes and isn't like that great of a defender or ball handler yet, like that does make me a little worried. He kind of needs to develop in all of his areas, but he's a nice, well-rounded player that could hit. I really like Cody Williams. I think he will be a really good 3-and-D player. But just like looking at that 10 through 17, I like all of those picks for those places. Jared McCain to Philly. Listen, Philly doesn't have anything on the books. Apparently now they have Andre Drummond, so their team is Andre Drummond, Joel Embiid, will be Tyrese Maxey. They're going to re-sign him, and Jared McCain.
And B-Ball Paul.
Maybe. We'll see. The Clippers did just make a signing that we'll discuss in a second. But
I'm not looking at my phone, so I'm excited. Should I be?
Yeah, no, you should not be.
Whoever it is, I'm going to be able to totally sell myself on it.
No, you're not. No, you're not.
Anyway, back to the draft.
I think with this draft, the common phrase was like, well, if you think about this draft just starting at pick 6 and in a normal draft, just take away picks 1 through 5. I feel like picks 1 through 4 are guys that you would draft between like 4 and 7 in a normal draft. But then guys like maybe even 1 through 5. But picks like 6 through 11 are all guys I feel like you'd take at the end of the lottery, like your Moses Moody's, your Chris Duarte's. And then like 13 through even guys like 27. I feel like those are the guys that you draft like 15 to 20 in a draft. So I feel like it's going to have a fair amount of depth. Bayron Holmes could get minutes this next year in Denver as a quality backup. Pacome Dattier apparently is coming over. He didn't want to be a draft and stash. People talk about there being a lot of upside. I see him as being kind of Carmelo Anthony-esque. He does a lot of mid-range shots. He's got a bigger body, maybe even like offensive, poor man's offensive Kawhi without the Kawhi defense, but just like think of that type of let me get into the mid-range and
use your body to get to your spot.
Yeah. He's still a few years away. He needs to develop, but he does have a really good frame on him. There's a lot of picks in here that I like. But Dylan, are you ready for the player that there's no way you could talk yourself into being happy about?
I'm going to do my best.
No, you're not. Kevin Porter Jr. has signed a 2-year deal with the Los Angeles Clippers, including a player option for the second year.
Okay. Well, you can sort of find yourself in a certain place as a team where you have the stability and the organizational culture that you can sign guys that no one else wants to touch. They brought in Josh Primo last year. They gave him a try. One guy who has a history of being a a sexual predator, let's say, and didn't receive the backlash because they have the organizational culture to take that hit. And so to bring in now a guy who's, an even worse person, but with more upside, that's the chances that you can take when you've established yourself as a positive organization.
The Clippers have also now just signed Miles Bridges.
We're putting together the real Jailblazers.
I'm kidding. They did not sign Miles Bridges. I just wanted to see if how you would respond to the terrible choices being made there. Like from a non-basketball perspective, Kevin Porter Jr. hospitalized his girlfriend, physically assaulted her, was pretty much banished from the NBA. I would have expected that to have stuck. There is some talent there. There have been also other off the court issues. There was him throwing the soup at who did he even throw the soup at? It was
I forgot about that.
it was a Cavs. Listen, the man has had on the court or basketball related chances. He has had non-basketball related things. I wouldn't go near him with a 10-foot pole if it's my team, but you are not wrong. He does offer some upside, so I expect a intense camp battle between him, Josh Primo, and Bones Highland. And dear God, will I be cheering for Bones Highland in this?
Yeah, I mean, when you're an organization like the Clippers, these are the kind of plays that you can make. When you've got an owner like Steve Ballmer who establishes a positive culture, you can try to make good people and good players out of people who are not good people. Certain organizations do not have the ability to do that. They do not have the goodwill to do that. They don't have the culture to do that. The Clippers are one of the ones who do, and hopefully he's able to become a better man first and foremost, and hopefully that is able to convert into also being a good player.
I think that's a wonderful thought and sentiment to try to end the pod on. Is hopefully he can become a better man and a better player. Is there any other free agent or draft or trade talks that you want to hit on before we close up for today?
One thing I did want to say is the Clay saga with Golden State is strange, given that the teams that he's going to be interviewing with are all expensive teams, and so he's looking at most likely a taxpayer mid-level. So for like Golden State to not even be able to offer the taxpayer mid-level, or to offend them so badly that he's willing to take a massive pay cut to sign anywhere else, is a sad way for the a dynasty player to leave his team.
Yeah, as happy as I would be to get him on the Lakers. So I was watching the Fever play the Seattle Storm, and Jewel Lloyd, who I don't think you follow much WNBA. You're in another country, that is. It's not even that popular here in the States, but Jewel Lloyd, the Gold Mamba, really good shooter, really good scorer, former MVP candidate, has been in a slump this year. But she got to break free of that slump, and you could just see the like championship swagger coming back, and her like getting a little into it. And I'm like, you know what? There's nothing more fun than watching a player who's been in a slump break free from it. And I was like, I hope that's what we get from Clay. I hope Clay can,
Clay's inevitable 40-piece against
really
like
back.
The Toronto Raptors for the Lakers is going to be one of those swagger regaining moments.
Yeah. Actual breaking news. This from Woj and Shams. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope intends to sign a 3-year, $66 million deal with the Orlando Magic.
Nuggets are screwed, man. What a joke of an organization. And decent pickup for Orlando. This seems about fair value for him. So the fact that Denver couldn't outbid this perfectly reasonable contract is a disgrace.
Yeah, I'd said
Nikola
20
Jokic should be demanding a
million.
trade.
Yeah, I do really like this pickup for Orlando. I don't know if it takes them out of the Paul George sweepstakes. I feel like it maybe moves them into a sign and trade range. So I think I don't know if that eats up too much of their cap.
Yeah, that is probably bad news for Paul George, that they seemingly prioritized KCP over him, and maybe they were aware that maybe it wasn't entirely realistic for them to get him, and he was maybe using them more for leverage, given that he said that he doesn't want to leave the West Coast.
Yeah, well, nothing like the West Coast of Philadelphia. Am I right? I feel like that joke would have landed a lot better if you were an American.
I have a general understanding of geography. I know that he's a phony by taking a meeting there as well.
Yeah. I do like it. I think it's good value. I do also think KCP is surprisingly old, just on the note of guys that are a little bit older than we maybe had previously believed. He came to the league in 2014. Pope is 30 years old, so I guess 3 years isn't that bad for a 30-year-old, but
yeah, that's a excellent contract. That's the
he will help
value.
with their guard defense rotation.
He's basically Gary Harris, who they had last year, but a little bit better.
Yeah, good little upgrade for Gary Harris.
Maybe Gary Harris goes back to Denver now. They can do a little swap.
Bring him home. I think Denver personally, if you're not going to sign these good players for more money, you got to bring back the fan favorites. Bring back Monte Morris. I don't think he's needed in Minnesota anymore. Bring back Facundo Campazzo. You had him for the bad years. Just bring him back.
Bring back Gallo. Bring back Wilson Chandler. Bring back Nene. Bring back Kenneth Faried. It's Ty Lawson. Bring back Ty Lawson. I'm sure he's available. This is the only way to salvage the team.
Kenneth Faried, you joke, but
G League superstar.
I'm trying to pull up his G League stats right now, which I realize is the man has game. Him left. All right.
I'm sure
well, his stats aren't loading. I am seeing. All right, maybe that's not the best idea. Maybe, not all ideas have to be
Aaron
good ideas.
Aflalo. Where's Aaron Aflalo?
All right. Any final takes?
No, let's get out of here. Hey, at least they broke back DeAndre Jordan. That's the important thing.
Where can the people find you?
Every other week on the Hoops Temple podcast.
You can find me here, Hoops Temple Podcast. Find me, Nate_Hoops Temple on TikTok. Check out the YouTube Hoop page, just Hoops Temple. Email us hoopstemple@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Catch you later.